Hey y'all.
Hello and welcome to another session of the Media Data Collaborative. And we got a nice full house today. All these genius faces that I love to see. And so we got a couple new people who are gonna introduce themselves first, and then we're gonna jump into our normal routine. So Carol, I'm gonna let you go first. Can you talk to everybody about origin story, mission, and passion?
Hey, yes. Good morning, and thanks for the invite, Johnny. I think I'll start with Carol Wood. My company is a Merge Media Group. I spent many years in editorial on the editorial side of publications, reporter and editor, and then was one of the three founding partners, actually, to bring things full circle, of the company that started Data Joe
Yep.
before before we spun Data Joe out into its own company. I don't know how many years ago that was, Johnny, but it was a long
Over
time
20.
ago. Yeah. So in those years in the Business Journal group that I was a partner, founding partner of, that Data Joe emerged from, um, I really fell in love with the business and operations side of my profession, and came to the understanding that unless you have a very, very solid, foundation of on your operations and your monetization, you're never going to be able to support the good work that journalists and editors do. So with that in mind, I really started to focus last 10 years, probably, if not more, on the business and ops side of my profession, probably maybe a shared profession for some of us. And was the founding COO of an online digital company in Colorado called the Colorado Sun, which it was 9 journalists who left the Denver Post to start an independent online digital organization. It's now a nonprofit. Kenny, I think I've run across you in somewhere in those years. And then I left the Sun because I was there. I was getting a lot of inquiries about how do we do this? How do we start our own online digital or a nonprofit or this or that? And I felt I could be of more service to as many people as possible rather than just working for one company. So for the past 3 or 4 years, I've been doing a Merge Media Group, been very busy, uh, have some really great clients, and am part of a startup that maybe not in this session, but in another
Yep.
session, I can share with some of you that it's another, basically an online media startup, but it's national. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carol. Appreciate you, and I'm so glad you're here. And everybody can hear from that you definitely belong in this room. So good to have you here. And then Paul, it's your turn, my man.
Cool. Thanks, Johnny. What's up?
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks. I think you invited me a couple months back. I normally have a standing client call at the same time slot every month, but that got postponed this month, so it's awesome to hop on. So Johnny, I know you. Guy's note taker. I think I know Guy, but I don't think he's here. If that's Guy
Guy.
Tasaka, if that's Guy Tasaka, and then Jacob Fogg also. So a couple faces out there. So what was this? Origin, passion,
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that? Origin story?
Origin story, mission, passion. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a kind of roundabout way getting into kind of the local media space. I kind of started my journey as a audiobook narrator about 8, 9 years ago now. People told me I had a good voice, and I was like, oh, it'll be super easy. It is not. And you're just kind of constantly chasing clients for your next audiobook to narrate and everything. Anyway, from there, I kind of transitioned over into working into just doing podcasts for clients, for corporate clients, influencers, for lack of a better term. Uh, so I've kind of been running an agency in that space. For the last 5 or 6 years. About 2 years ago, I started working with a local publisher in Washington called the Woodinville Weekly, and it kind of reawakened a kind of love of just like local journalism that I had been dormant, hadn't been paying attention to for years and years. So I kind of started trying to lean more into that, finding more publishers to work with and just help local publishers monetize and add a new content wing to their arsenal. So in doing that, to find people in the space, I launched a podcast called Small Press Big Ideas, which I still host, about the business of local news. Johnny was on an episode, so was Guy. So now I do that podcast, Small Press Big Ideas. I also write a newsletter called Local News Industry Pulse. It's a curated briefing of the local media business landscape. And I kind of started a separate agency from my original one called Local Pod, where we've lowered the price to entry into podcasting for publishers, and I also help with pretty much anything podcast related with publishers, monetizing, growing, just getting it off the ground. We've gotten into the AI space. I've actually got some AI narrated podcasts, which is pretty cool. If anybody's interested in hearing more about that sometime. But yeah, I hope I'm not rambling too much. That's kind of my story, where I'm at now. And Johnny's great, and he vouches for everybody here. So it's great to meet you all and meet you all for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, good to see you here, man. This
Yeah.
is again, it's the right place for you. So all right, so we're gonna jump into it. Not a lot of housekeeping. I guess a couple things just from me personally, a couple updates for me. Uh, so this media data collaborative kind of lives under the umbrella of the Data Joe newsletter and content wing. I guess I don't even know if you could call it a wing because, well, I don't know. When you got five people at your company, I don't know if you can have wings or divisions, but it's become a big part of what we do. And so that's where these get published. They get published under the Media Data Collaborative tab on the datajoe.substack.com site, which is the media data revenue newsletter, right? So this kind of is one of the initiatives that lives under that. Another initiative that I'm doing is called People of Media. And so that lives under the umbrella, and that's just interviews with interesting, fascinating, and excellent people within media. And so everybody that comes to this call, at some point, you're going to get hit up by me to do an hour interview to go up on the site so that people can learn from you, because everybody here has something to teach that I think is important in a piece of the puzzle. So the most recent one I just did, it's not published yet. It's about to be live. Kenny, you'll appreciate this, man. I got to interview John Garrett over at Community Impact for an hour, and that guy blew my mind. He blew my mind with his vision for the future of media and the numbers that he's throwing out there. So like he's a real concrete guy. He likes to bring things down to numbers. And so he kind of just opened things up and said, this is what's going on and this is how we did it. And so keep an eye out for that one. And if you're able to help me get the word out, like that's probably my biggest weakness at this stage that I'm in is getting the word out. I've got probably 400 subscribers to the newsletter or something like that. I'd love to have more, but I don't know how many more I should have. Like that whole part, I'm not. That's the content's got this place where it's sick. Like the content is sick. It's good, but the getting the word out strategy is, and Kenny, you gave me some notes, and we just haven't been able to really pull it all together. So anyway, that's an ask I'll do up front, is if you can help me get the word out, especially on this John Garrett interview, that'd be great. Um, so let's go ahead and jump in. Usually, and I probably won't do this time, but I'll probably do it next time. Usually, the first thing we do is testimonials and meetings and things that are brewing behind the scenes. Actually, I am going to do this. If anybody's got something brewing behind the scenes within this group, like a collaboration or anything, now would be the time that you can talk about that,
Is that my cue?
I guess.
Well, Jacob and I, Jacob, where are you? You've got yourself turned off. Jacob and I are working on building out a solution to one of the big problems that we're seeing in publishing and actually in a lot of other agencies and in a lot of the contexts, and that is we're forming an agency called True Path Analytics, where we're going to be helping publishers with one of the biggest challenges, which is looking through your data and analytics and finding insights, and then helping them execute them. Um, Basically, what we've seen is a lot of publishers are still kind of flying by the seat of their pants, and they either can't afford or don't have the expertise or just don't want to uh, dive into the numbers to see what's actually going on with their audience, with their revenue, because audience and revenue walk hand in hand. And so we are basically putting this together, coming together with what the services that we can do and what is most needed. And there you are, Jacob. We did an interview with Johnny a couple of weeks ago. Very, very lovely experience there. Very informative, and we really do appreciate it. And we are open to taking suggestions from people as to what they think the biggest needs, where the biggest fail points right now, and what is needed to solve a lot of the problems. Whereby we see publishers doing things like signing on with ad networks that literally take 50% of the revenue for a programmatic ad network just because they don't know any better or don't know how to read the numbers or don't know how to contract. And so
Mhm.
these are the types of things that we want to try to, you know, figure out a way to solve and help for publishers. What else you got, Jake?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, Dave. I think that's exactly it. Just bringing what both Dave and I have been building on top of for the last couple decades, and just really helping publishers be able to find some benefit there. So yeah,
Yeah.
All right,
good job.
so
Well
just to
done.
nail it down, a little bit before I move on. So specifically under the category of SEO,
Hmm.
and data storytelling, right? So
Yeah,
analytics, telling the story of the analytics, and then and then helping, and what you're up against is, you know, a lot of times publishers will sign on with marketing companies to do these huge, expensive analysis things, and then the company
yep,
leaves holding the bag, right? Like, hey, we gave you all this insight, and now you go figure out what to do with it. And
yeah,
so they
exactly.
spent all this money, and they don't know what to do. You guys wanted to fix that problem, so you teamed up to try to fix that problem, and now you have an offering, low
Yeah,
cost, affordable offering. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the key. Thanks for bringing that up, Johnny. I think that's really the key is not being a here's your report, have a nice day, but really being a partner in the process to help them not just see the data, but to interpret it and take action on that. And then where needed, be the hands that actually execute that action. So yeah.
So one
Yeah.
thing, just a little anecdote that I had with a client last week that might be helpful is I think one thing that people miss in looking at their analytics is translating them into Venn diagrams so that they can see
Mm,
intersections between different groups. Like, for example, there are situations where one group should be entirely inside of another group.
Hmm.
But when you look at the data, it's not. Some of it is outside
yeah.
of that group. Okay. And
Hmm.
then that raises some big questions. Why are a third of the people in this group not in this other group where they should absolutely be? So I think doing that kind of analysis where you can see where there are overlaps where there shouldn't be, or where there aren't overlaps where there should be, and then asking the appropriate question about why the heck is this happening and digging into that. I think that's the kind of analysis that a lot of publishers don't get, and it would be very helpful to them.
Very much so. Your focus there on getting to the why. Uh,
Yep.
what is anybody can push a button and export something out of Google Analytics, and
Mhm.
then get a spreadsheet full of numbers or a graph with the little squiggly line or whatever. And it's like, okay, I've got the what, but why is this happening? Why are
Yeah.
the audiences doing this? What can I do about it? How does it
Mm,
become Jacob's heard me tell this story that basically my paradigm for this was what I've seen really succeed in other markets. For example, with a publisher in Brazil that was doing classified advertising for cars. And they realized that it wasn't about selling classified advertising. That wasn't why people were buying. They were buying it so they could sell more cars. And their job was to help the people that were paying for the services do the thing that they actually needed to do. And our goal here is to get to a place where what we're producing is a monthly report, various levels of services on how detailed we go on this and how much time it takes us to do that. And what it is, like that car report, on the first day of every week, Monday morning, the car dealers would walk into their office and they'd have in their email inbox a report that told them, how their ads were performing, how many clicks they got, if they should improve the photos, what was the pricing scheme on all the other cars in the area. It was how to run your dealership in a box. I mean, at that point, you can't not subscribe to or pay for this because it helps you do your job.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we want to get to. We want to get to the point where what we're giving publishers is here's how to handle all the things on your data, your technology stack, your SEO, your syndication to like Google News or Apple News. All these pieces here that are deep, that are technical, that you don't have the people to handle, but we can take some of that off your shoulders so that as a publisher, you can focus on the things that are you're good at. The 5 alarm fires of producing enough content to feed the daily beast. So that's our vision, grandiose as it may sound. Any comments here on what you think are some of the other holes or like what might be some specific service offerings that might help out? Anybody? What are the needs you're seeing?
Dave, I'll speak to that. And Jacob, it's good to see you. Been many, many, many years, but I remember when you were hired at David Hill a long time ago. It's very good to see
It's been a journey.
Yeah, quite the journey. One of the things that I noticed, because one of the things that I do is also act as a fractional COO for a lot of local, regional, hyper-local news organizations. And so what you mentioned this, Dave, is like they don't know what to do with this stuff. They don't know what to do. And what I run across is a lot of really great journalists who have started a news organization and they're really terrible business people. And so I think one thing I would think about as they use, what you're going to offer is really what's the follow-up and the hand-holding, whether that's with you, doing that, or whether that's with somebody else doing that. But oftentimes, and capacity is an issue because, there's just the capacity to have somebody siloed to looking at and thinking about, what you want to do and what you want to provide. They know that they need it. They don't have the capacity to deal with it or to follow up on the analysis once you provide it. So think about that next step might be helpful in how they can really utilize a great idea.
Oh, well, thank you.
Right.
That is, we had considered of, okay, my thought is that I've seen that at so many enterprises that everybody went out and they drank the Kool-Aid of, we need big data. And so they hired data scientists and they came in with like data scientists did what they did and collected all the numbers and they plunked down this giant report on the desk in front of people. And everybody looked at it and goes, what do we do with that? And so you have to get that. Yeah, exactly. I see people nodding. Been there. So it's all about how do we turn this into something that actually improves things? How do we start breaking these things down to the point of your page traffic says this, it gets reflected in your ad statistics like this. This is going really good. This is maybe a little shaky, and this we should to use the voice and accent. You got to cut that out and cut that out right now, Dr. Phil.
I'm about to sell for you real quick. So for like it's like because I like the co-referral idea here too. Like I think probably all of us know people that could probably use this. I think Jake and Dave are like a warm hug. Like that's the thing. Y'all are like a warm hug. And so like I think a lot of times I've handed Jake quite a bit of business. And that's because when it takes 5 minutes for the publisher that's like nervous about a technological investment, it takes about 5 minutes for them to be like, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's going to take care of me. It's because he'll come on the call and you can just see him put the arm around the person. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to do this together. It's going to be okay. So we're going to do this together. It's going to be okay in regards to SEO and analytics and interpreting, like interpreting your data. These guys will give that warm hug. So let's cut it off there. We'll leave it at that. I know you both, and I want you to be successful with this initiative. And it was also a baby of the Media Data Collaborative, so I expect 30 to 40%. All right, so moving on. I threw something in the chat for everybody too. It might be it's one of my top 5 interviews this year that I did. It's a guy named Jan Freitag, who was instrumental in building what was called Hotel News Now, this database under a company called STR that then got sold to the business that he helped build got sold to CoStar for $500 million. And in this interview, he says exactly how they did it, how they took 3 data points and built a $500 million business. And I think anybody that's interested in a storytelling format of revenue production from data, like that is the best interview I've ever done in that vein. So I threw that in there for anybody who wants to check that out and tell me what you think. But I think this group particularly will eat it up. So first question for everybody. I gave y'all a list of 6. I said I was probably going to start in the middle, and I am. Any major developments you see coming down the pipe in 2025? So major developments you see coming, and these can be either media-wide, like macro, big things that are coming that are going to affect or disrupt or enhance, right? Or in your business in 2025, like what you're doing, big changes, big developments that you see coming down the pipe in either of those arenas.
I have a big one, but I don't know if it's going to be 2025.
Okay, bring it.
Well, it's pretty much what we talked about before, Johnny. It's the complete change in the way people collect, consume media. That people will be using AI agents to get their content rather than going out to get it. So I think that has some very practical implications in terms of the website will no longer be the front page.
Yep.
The CMS will actually be the gateway between the content producer and the content consumer, because the AI will be interacting with the CMS, not with the web page. That e-commerce won't be from the brand to a person. It'll be from the brand to an AI. Because somebody will say, I'm willing to spend $30 a month on content and find me the stuff that I want. So the AI will go out and spend that money appropriately. So there's just a whole lot of structural things that will have to happen to the way content is distributed, priced, made available to people. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, because what's that saying? Everybody overestimates what will happen in a year and underestimates what will happen in 10 years, right? So maybe it'll be 2-3 years, but it's going to have huge implications for the whole structure of the way content works.
This is good, Greg. So I don't want to spend too much time here, because we did talk about this the last session, and we got a lot. Is there any new stuff though since the last session? Any new gas on the fire for you, Greg, or new developments that we should be aware of?
Well, for me, what's new is just thinking through what the implications will be for all the different components of a business. Yeah. It's one thing to think conceptually about how this will work, but it's another thing to think about if you have a WordPress site, how's that going to affect your WordPress site? That you have to have more focus on RSS feeds rather than the way content is displayed visually. And then there'll be other questions about licensing. If somebody purchases an article, do they have the right to convert it to audio? So
Mm.
I think that the important stuff about this is all the downstream effects, all the little wrinkles and how it's going to work into the business.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. And then I'm gonna throw the link in. Greg, will you remind me to throw the link into the interview that because I interviewed you about this topic at length for 60 minutes. So for anybody who wants to catch up on that conversation, in fact, I'm gonna waste a little bit of time and do it now just because I know that I will forget if I don't. Uh, is this a faux pas? Am I making a mistake? Nah, never. I found it. Okay, so here you go. The future of publishing, where publishing meets AI. Uh, so that article, that interview is there for everybody. All right. Anybody else? Major developments that you see coming down the pipe for you personally in your work, or in the media industry at large. 2025.
Yeah, I'll hop in real quick, Johnny. I've anecdotally seen a lot more inbound interest coming in the podcast realm. Like you couldn't have lined it up better, like with right after the election. Because I don't know if you've heard all this branding about the podcast election and everything like that. And
Haven't. Can you say what that means?
so basically the idea is the Obama in '08 is kind of it's the social media election. He was like the first campaign to really utilize like Facebook and get away from like the traditional media. I think Kennedy and Nixon famously had a debate in the first TV election, and I don't know what year it was, whenever Kennedy was elected, where everybody listening on the radio said Nixon absolutely slaughtered Kennedy, but everybody watching, saw handsome young JFK versus bloated, sweaty Richard Nixon up there, and they're like, "Oh, that guy definitely won." So the what I've heard in my circles is this is the podcast election. Between
Wow.
Harris and Trump, they went on I don't know how many podcasts. The top tier podcasts in the world, and a lot of people they're just going direct. People are going directly to news influencers, if you will. The Rogans of the world, the Call Me Daddy. I'm not sure her name of the world.
Yeah.
And I've just seen more people, like I've been thinking about this for years. How do we, dip a toe in, test the waters? And once again, I'm biased because I'm just thinking about podcasts and talking to people about them all day long. But that's what
Right.
I'm seeing coming down for my business. So it's a tailwind for my business. Hopefully, that's what I'm seeing over here.
Dude, so cool, man. Is what came to mind as you said that is it almost feels like we have entered into the age of influencers, right? Like there's like
A little bit,
influencers have a lot more power than they've ever had before.
for lack of
Yeah.
yeah, for lack of a better term. Like I said, I work with people with large social media followings. A lot of them hate the term influencer that aren't to do with news or anything like that. And I think social media. I think there's a great talk by the founder of I'm blanking on the name of the company, Patreon, and he had this great TED talk about the end of the death of the follower. Whereas,
Yeah.
with TikTok coming in and you can have 1 million followers doesn't mean they're going to see your stuff anymore anyway on social media. But the direct links, the newsletters and podcasts of the world, if you can utilize those right, just that direct link, like somebody was talking about, just going right to the RSS feed for the AI agents to stumble upon those. I'm not really sure how that works yet, but I see that's a trend going forward from where I'm sitting. I'm leaning more into my newsletter also. I stalled way too long in actually starting one. Now I've started one. I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. It's a great line of communication directly to my audience. Yeah.
Are you aware of Jim Briner's newsletter? Are you guys aware of each other's content?
Don't think so. Maybe not.
You,
That's why I'm
you
here
need to be,
to
man.
find
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
Jim puts out some really good stuff. Um,
Awesome.
what's it called,
Thank
Jim?
you. Thank you.
You want to throw the link in there in the chat, Jim?
Um, sure.
I think both of you should. Paul, you too, if you don't mind. Would love for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, for sure. I'll pull it up in a
Jim's
minute and toss it in there.
Jim's a smart man.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You're too kind.
He's also a humble man. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like us saying all that stuff.
And he interviewed one of my good friends this last week, Ismail Nafria, who's one of the smartest digital media guys I know. He used to run the national newspaper of Spain, and I interviewed him many years ago for one of the first case studies I did for Newspaper Association of America.
Yeah.
And that's Ismail always has amazing insights.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that personal, it's the podcasts and newsletters have an air of honesty and authenticity and credibility, which is basically what I said and what I've been seeing. And Ismail focuses on that too, how he has made he's gone totally independent, and his newsletter is the center of his business. He's not getting the greater part of his revenue from the newsletter, but that opens up all kinds of other pathways where he can generate revenue, events, publications, appearances, teaching, and so forth.
Yep, that's the way. Like they said on the
You guys
Mandalorian.
get in Pub Weekly?
No.
James, I don't know how to pronounce it, Evele or something, puts out in Pub Weekly, and the most recent issue starts off with this. The latest Edelman Trust Barometer shows that there's an unprecedented lack of faith in institutional leaders. An average of 69% of respondents worry government leaders, business leaders, and journalists purposely mislead them by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. So I think in the media space, that question of trust, I mean, trust in the media has never been all that high, but it's like really, really bad right now. So I think that's going to be a big trend.
Are you equating that at all with why people are having more trust for like more private single influencer type organizations, or is that
absolutely
Yeah.
because you trust someone who is like you. You meet somebody, they have similar values, you like their personality, you're going to trust that person. So that's why people are trusting individual podcasters or people who have their own news show rather than they're trusting ABC, NBC, that sort of thing.
Do you think that there had to be like there pre-news media, pre-brand, like there had to be like a before that like influencer or like people that we trusted it for our news and information. What I'm saying is like how cyclical is this? Like where we kind of go from trust in a brand and to trust in an influencer because at some point like that cannot, and not to be cynical, but does it stay authentic forever? Does it stay uncorrupted forever? Does it jump the shark eventually? Probably. And then what do we bounce back to? Or what do we move on to? And I'm like, so part of me is just thinking like really long term now, like where do we go after influencers? Because like can't last forever, right?
Yeah.
Like, can you not see the podcast market being flooded with AI generated podcasts and there being so much noise and the authentic types can't even really get their head above the noise? Like, where do you go after that? And not to take it in that direction because I just like to think about these things, you know?
Yeah. Although I really want to do a real life Turing test on AI generated content versus people generated content because on LinkedIn, you see all these people constantly complaining about AI generated this, AI generated that. I really doubt they can tell the difference half the time. I seriously doubt it. That if you put two things next side by side, human generated, AI generated, that they're really going to pick the right one.
I think for like baseline, like kind of mediocre content, I think you're probably right. But for stuff that's like really kind of like groundbreaking or innovative, or just like a podcast that's like actually genuinely funny. Have you ever laughed at a joke that AI has ever told you? Ever? In your entire life? No. Like you go to ChatGPT, you can do it all day. You won't laugh once. You know, so
I
like
have,
there's got to be some
but
sort
it
of
was Chuck Norris jokes. I created a bunch of Chuck Norris jokes through AI, and they were freaking hilarious. But go ahead.
really.
Yes,
Mohan.
one out of 100. 1 out of 100 was hilarious. How about that?
Yeah.
I think ultimately, depending, irregardless of platform and channel, right? It goes back to what was mentioned earlier is the trustworthiness of your source. It's having that personal connection and that trustworthiness, right? It you see that now with or have been seeing it and will continue to see it, where you see journalists and writers who are known for their byline, who have disagreements with the big papers, Times, Post, whatever, and they go off and they create their own Substack, right? And people understand, and so you know, if you want, however you want to make that definition, that's an influencer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think ultimately to me that's always been the key, and is establishing that trust and relationship, and it does not matter what the platform is.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say what's good about this shift is it's a whole lot easier to stop trusting one journalist, one influencer, than it is to get enough cues that you stop trusting a brand. So I think, and in some ways that's coming back to the core, because for an individual influencer, trust is their currency, and without the trust they're dead. But for these brands, they have discovered, for worse, that they can get away with a lot of mistrusting actions and still keep their audience.
Yeah, but isn't that true for influencers too? Like trust was the currency for big news brands, and a lot of them kind of, strayed from it a little bit, and if a lot of it. And don't influencers, like, won't they also make compromises and kind of
Yeah,
trade off
maybe.
all of the trust for something else? I mean, we're human and fundamentally corruptible, and I think that influencers are likely to fall down the same path.
And I agree completely with that. I think it's a little bit different when people are trusting a brand versus trusting a
Oh
person,
yeah.
right? So that to Jacob's point, if a brand has multiple obvious missteps, there's still a lot of runway for people to accept those mistakes. Having a personal, as an influencer, if you start being obvious and have one or two screw ups, obvious bad screw ups, or misleading, whatever, the currency is depleted quickly.
Right. But I think sometimes they could not screw up. And it's a matter of perspective. It's the way they see things, the way listeners see things, and the way other people say that people should see things. And it's just like sometimes you have someone maybe not it doesn't even deserve it, and there's doubt. So I don't know, just something
Yeah.
not to go too far down the rabbit hole.
To take a look at it would be the influencer Tim Pool, who had a huge influential network with all the young dude bros. And then this last fall, it was discovered that he was getting paid $100,000 a week by the Kremlin to crank out pro-Russian propaganda. Him and like a couple other guys were getting paid 100 G's a week by the Kremlin. How much does that cost him? He's still around. He's still kicking around. I don't know if his audience has cratered or not. It doesn't seem to have.
Wow.
You can wind up getting bribed by an enemy of the United States and still retain your audience. We'll see. Is it if he does wind up spiraling or what?
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So let's put a bow on that one. And because that, wow. I don't even know what to do with that story, Dave. But
Got into a session from the International Symposium on Online Journalism, which is where I met Jim these many years ago, and it was a session, a panel of what can journalists and influencers learn from each other, and it's absolutely brilliant, and it covers a lot of the things that we're kind of touching on here, but it's from the people who are really inside that industry who really have insights. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'll shut up now.
oh no, you're good. You're good, man. I love hearing your voice. You should talk to Paul about doing audio narration in the future. So anything else? Any other developments? What big things coming out so far? We've got agencies and kind of this fundamental shift in how media is consumed and how it's paid for. And then we've got the kind of the podcast era, or the podcast election, or the idea that individual influencers are gaining power and influence with their platforms. We're going to see more of that in 2025, I think, is the prediction, right, Paul? So anything else you see coming down the pipe?
I've heard some event producers say that sponsors prefer in-person events to virtual events. So I'm wondering if that's going to have an effect on moving things back towards in-person events. Because obviously, if you're running an event, you have to have sponsors.
Yeah.
If you're getting more money on the sponsor side, if it's in person, then that, never mind what the attendees want, it's what the sponsors want that matters.
That makes me wish Christy were here, because she's the event like unicorn. She'd probably have some more data to throw into that. But yeah. But from what you're seeing, Greg, you think there could be the stirrings of even more, because it seems like events. Yeah.
Well, that's what I've heard from event organizers, that the sponsors pay more and want in-person opportunities, because from their perspective, they want to meet people and try to sell them.
Yeah.
And get their undivided attention, at least while they're on the location.
That was always a big piece of the business at the business journals. I was part of American City Business Journals for 2 decades, and the events were huge generators of revenue, both from tickets for the events and then, of course, sponsorship money. You can keep the sponsors at arm's length. I mean, you can give them certain things, but you can also keep them at arm's length and not have them influence. You don't have to sell your soul to the sponsors, but you have to have very clear guidelines. And I think we at that time were always good at it. I see they're still very big in that. And also, Greg, I think one of the things that's happening is kind of an anti-Zoom reaction from COVID. Everywhere in this, I work with these Service Corps retired executives. We volunteer to give advice to entrepreneurs. And one of the things we're seeing there is that events for all those organizations, there's a reaction to against Zoom calls and all that, because people, often don't pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people just want to be together. People want to get back together in person and be in each other's presence. Yeah.
All right. At the risk of talking too much here,
you're not talking too much, buddy. Man, bring it.
All right. A meeting that Jacob and I had this week with Amazon Web Services, and specifically their AI division, really hit me, because it confirmed a lot of the things that I'd been hearing from my data wizard friends, which is that the AI companies right now have gotten to the point where they've built out their technological back end. They've dump trucked hundreds of billions of dollars, if not more, into building out the AI engines. And now what they're looking at is, how do we make these things practical? And one of the real cores to that is, how do we get white label, reliable training set data into these engines so that they can produce better results? Because now that the AI companies have all gotten to like this level where everybody's got this level of competency, now it's about how good is the AI. And they're having to start to show return on all this investment. And so Jacob and I were in that meeting with Amazon, and they were basically, telling us that, hey, look, we're looking at trying to come up with practical ways for us to sell this AI, so we can start making back some of all the money that we've dumped onto it. And what that means for news publishers is, news publishers are producing high quality, reliable, factual content rather than garbage in, which leads to the garbage out. And so I think there's a real opportunity coming here. It's something that I've been seeing for a while and that I've been hearing about for a while. Anyone else on that one?
Greg, we talked about this in our interview when I interviewed you, right? Like that you were isn't it's not what we were talking about? Like there may be an opportunity for a broker to come in and
Yeah. Although, I mean,
mediate the
one thing you
relationship
said,
between
Dave,
AI.
is that news companies are producing high quality value content, but 69% of people don't trust what they're saying. So you got this, you got this thing going on.
They won't trust it when it comes from the news company, but they'll trust it when the AI bot spits it out at them, huh?
Maybe, maybe.
Could be.
Well, you know, I also read, this is kind of interesting, that they found that people don't have as many guards up when they're having a conversation with AI as they do when they're talking to a person. Because when you're talking to a person, you're always assuming there's something you're not saying. There's some implication behind your words. There's something you're thinking that you're not saying. There's all this other stuff going on in your head. You don't have that feeling whatsoever when you're talking with AI, right? What it
Do you ever
says
get
is
the
what it says.
sense? Do you get the sense that there's a little bit of a novelty effect? Because that just made me think. I remember talking to my now wife, Katie, who we were talking about the weather or something like that. And I was just using Google Weather. I'd be like, weather, Red Bank, Jersey. And this is back, like, she had found Weather Underground. And she's, no, 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 you got to go on Weather Underground. That's where the real weather's at. And it was just like, because it wasn't, obviously, nobody really, you can't really trust forecasts to begin with, but like somehow, because there was an alternative that we were unfamiliar with, that it was somehow more trustworthy. So like maybe there's a certain kind of novelty there that makes something initially trustworthy. Maybe we have like a trust first way of going about it until we find out later that it's about as reliable as everyone else.
Does it kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier, where you kind of tie, like you're saying, about the trust, and then David talking about trying to monetize it. So it's kind of like back in the day where you take the engine, you white label it for the source that you trust, and then you just go to that source. So it doesn't. To what Greg's saying, sure, 69% of people don't trust the media, but there's still, that still means there's 31% or that trust certain parts of the media. So if you're saying that, hey, I'm part of that 31%, I'm not taking this AI engine, I'm gonna skin it and white label it and say I'm part of that. So now I have that trust, and that kind of, not to digress too much, but then that kind of makes it's part of, I think, why the whole deep seek thing tanked so many stocks too, because they're coming in. They were saying that, hey, you can create your own without your own engine for much cheaper than what the current AI companies are selling. So there's that factor too. So
Yep. So anybody have tips for how like let's say there's media leaders who are watching this, this is just a lot of information. And so part of what we're here to do is to bring out these big ideas, but then also determine if there's practical implications for, the local small to mid-size, large too, but I think small to mid-size media publisher who's trying to figure out, gosh, what do I do? What do I do with all this? For this one in specific, right? I would say I'll put that one back to you, Jason. Any specific advice you'd have for how to break this into consumable portions?
wait, what are you asking?
Sorry, what am I asking? I'm a small to mid-sized publisher. What do I do about what you just said?
Regarding my first question is always what what's, and this is nothing new, right? Is where's my audience coming from and how are they consuming it, and where's my trust factor? And so if you're, let's say I am the local publisher and I now trust me to, I'll use a local one that I trust and a lot of people trust for LA. It's called LA Taco, right? It sounds funny because you think taco, it's LA, and then it's food oriented, but really LA Tacos become one of the most trusted sources of journalism for locals.
Wow.
And Dave, Carol, I see you nodding your head. I assume you're familiar with them. And they started moving to a membership and merchandising model about 3 years ago. And so I think if they were to go into the AI space, that's exactly what would happen, right? You would say they would go to a company, whether they want to do it themselves with DeepSeek and use the open source, or go to David and Jacob and work with one other company and then white label it.
Yeah.
It just depends on what's your tolerance in terms of investment. White label it and say, hey, you guys trust us. This is a trust source, because what works better and less investment when you're coming with AI. And David, feel free to jump in and correct me. I know you and I had some conversations about this. When you're working with an LLM, it's much easier, just like anything else. If I'm specializing in it'll learn a lot faster. It'll be a lot more accurate if I'm specializing in this silo. So if I'm LA Taco and I now know that people come to me for hyper local news about whether it be the food scene, the community scene, the activist scene, I now take my AI, say, look, just focus on that and create my AI on that, and have it learn everything about LA food scene. So that if I, as a consumer, come on and I'm like, hey, where can I get the best tacos on a Tuesday night that's on Northeast LA?
Yeah.
Right? I know I can trust that when it's spitting it out versus Google.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, I'm rambling.
No, you're not at all. I mean, thank you for bringing it down to like the actual street level, right? Like that's the street level. That's a street level application that could work because it's good stuff in and not garbage, right? Good stuff in, good stuff out. And I think you're also speaking to the fact, like, yes, it's changing, right? The way people are looking for answers to their questions is changing from search, and it's probably changing fast. It's changing pretty fast, I think.
And I think that speaks to the whole specialization that Dave brought up earlier. Is like when we can start to specialize the AI interfacing, the results and responses can be so much more applicable to what the end user is actually trying to do.
And the idea here that we talked about, Jason, was the idea of licensing that content to the AI engines. But one of the things that I've seen in my own practice and I've seen around is that people, if you're going to license your content to one AI engine, you don't want it running up in the others. Otherwise, what's the licensing fee for? So, they have these longer and longer lists of like all the stuff you can block in robots.txt, right? Well, it turns out that a lot of these AI bots that are scraping your content don't respect that at all. They just scrape your content anyway.
Dang.
Like one of the reviewer sites, I'm not sure if it was Wirecutter or whatever, found that they were getting 10 million hits a day from these AI bots that were scraping all of their content, even they were saying, don't scrape our content. So one of the things that came out is I think some coder recently came up with this plugin that you can put on your site that when the AI bots come in there, it just spams them. It just gives them a whole bunch of garbage data off of that to pollute the bad AIs. Meanwhile, you have an API that gives your data to the good AIs that you've licensed your content to. And I think we're going to have to see a lot more of that if these trends keep up. So that, for the local publishers, one of the ones that I'm working with, medical practice here in Chicago, is working on this as well, because they found a whole bunch of their stuff winding up in places and getting repurposed in ways that was really not cool. Anyway.
Wow.
And that kind of makes me think, right, if that is where, again, if we're talking to a smaller, medium-sized publisher, you only have limited resources, if really the way to attack is the other direction, saying I license the engine, the infrastructure, and I bring it within my walled garden. I don't allow information out. I'm feeding it my
I see what
own.
you're
So
saying.
that again, and it's back to that white labeling branding thing. And I have much more control over it. And part of where I was thinking, the reason I was thinking about that, and I don't know if how some of you may be aware of this, there's a huge issue right now with law firms and Copilot and Microsoft, precisely because of what David just said. Right? They are, as a lawyer, you need to stay siloed because of confidentiality, blah, blah, blah. Right? And what's happening is you now cannot turn off Copilot, and they cannot guarantee that they won't take data from another client, pull it up as it's helping you compose your supposedly boilerplate information. So that's causing a lot of issues. And so unfortunately, what Microsoft is saying is they can't prove it one way or the other. And so for a lot of law firms, they're struggling with it because they cannot use an alternative. Course being as antiquated as they are, they will demand a Word document. They don't want a PDF. They don't want whatever. So to loop it all back, it then, to me, I do wonder if that's a potential to use, again, my example is, do you then just better off licensing? Instead, you licensing the content. I license
the
AI and bring it inside my walled garden, so I can then protect the info that's coming in, that's being used by the AI, and the info that's going out. And then that also then again builds on the trust that I have my audience, and have people come to me, which obviously then we can monetize.
Bro, Jason, that's the first time I've heard that take on it. I've only heard the conversation going the other way, right? Like, how do we protect ourselves? How do media organizations protect themselves from having their data taken advantage of and taken into these machines? And you're saying there could be a future in which, they're bringing the AI machines in-house to work for them on their behalf and staying a walled garden, right? Like keeping themselves out of that.
And mind you, the only reason this is, I've only been chewing on it, is because DeepSeek only came out recently.
Right.
So
and DeepSeek is an inexpensive alternative to being able to take that avenue.
So unfortunately, as always, we've hit time, and so I do try to respect everybody's time. So we're gonna go ahead and close with no fanfare, really. Like, this conversation, if you want to continue the conversation, let's continue it offline in the email thread. But I absolutely loved spending time with everybody today, and this is the Media Data Collaborative signing off.